the behaviour that's manifesting from their mental illness is impacting on the other tenants in such a way that we are sometimes forced to evict that person, and that is one of the saddest and hardest parts of my job. That's really difficult, and a lot of the time they'll end up back on the streets.
If a small community can respond to people who have been affected in this way, to help them feel that they're still accepted and that they have a sort of intrinsic kind of dignity, what does it say about the wider community's capacity to I don't know, lighten up, guys?
But all this demonstrates that while we know a little bit more about mental health and the needs of psychiatric patients, the general community still is a bit fearful of psychiatric patients.
In many ways, the larger group of people who are affected by mental illness can perhaps almost be invisible. It's not that noticeable. You won't know them. They're working in the supermarket, they're working in a bank, they're working at the bakery, you know. Those people for whom it's had a profound effect. We've all seen them around, behaving in a sort of, maybe behaving in an odd way, seeming extremely paranoid, very anxious, muttering to themselves, odd sort of gestures or behaviours. Does that mean people should be fearful? It's the opposite. It's the person affected who's the one who's fearful, who's apprehensive, who is scared of the world. The world is a scary place for them and an unfriendly, unwelcoming place for them.
Today, when a patient has a mental health issue, they are taken to either a general hospital or a private psychiatric hospital. The average stay in most of these inpatient wards is something like 2 weeks.
When a patient's admitted to a hospital, the treatment goals are to prevent self-harm or harm to others. Modification of their current drug therapy, for instance, if it's not working or the side effects are too bad, they need to be closely monitored for drug effectiveness and side effects, and to stabilise their symptoms and return them back to the community.
They are still given treatment as in the days of institutions, but the primary aim and goal of the medical and treating staff now is that they be discharged as quickly as possible.
The thought that people should stay in that setting for the shortest possible time, where it can be assessed that they're no longer a risk to themselves or to anybody else, then go into a setting which is more normal, for want of a better word.
One of the issues with psychiatric patients is that they tend to sleep in for a lot of the day, particularly those with schizophrenia. And CCU, one of their goals is to encourage patients to get up out of bed earlier rather than staying in bed till 12 or 1 o'clock in the afternoon.
We will get referrals either from the clinic or from the hospital saying this person just really isn't managing for a whole range of reasons. There may be some, family breakdown, they've had a crisis, loss of a family member.
People with a good social network that have a reason to get out of bed every day, who feel a part of the community, respond better to treatment.
The hospital will call an agency nurse, an agency psychiatric nurse who's called a psych special, which means that nurse has the sole responsibility and only the responsibility of watching that patient and making sure they don't harm themselves, don't go away, whatever, and that nurse looks after them the entire time until a bed becomes available.
St Vincent's Hospital has 44 acute beds. 5 of those beds are for Aboriginal members of the community that can come from out of that catchment area anywhere in Victoria, which leaves 39 beds for over 200,000.
Whenever I've visited them, I've rarely ever heard that they've got 2 or 3 spare beds I think on occasions I've heard them say that to me, but it's been pretty rare. And likewise with the beds in the inpatient unit. No sooner does one patient get discharged, there's another one waiting to be admitted.
Part of my work is in an outreach capacity. So I go out into the community and work with people within their homes, and these clients have complex psychological, emotional, social, financial problems.
Deinstitutionalization was a big cause of such a high percentage now living in unsupported accommodation like our accommodation. We've since the deinstitutionalisation process, it was decided that many people would be better off going out into the community, so many institutions were shut down.
Trying to get somebody into housing in Melbourne is a problem because most of the housing is full up. In terms of the inner city, depending on the kind of housing that you're requiring, the wait can be indefinite.
I feel that many rooming houses have become unofficially mini institutions, except we're not recognised for it and we don't get any funding for it.
Around about the early to mid-90s, there was a bit of a global push towards closing down a lot of mental institutions. I guess breaking away from the old school of thought that these big lock-up kind of institutions built on hills. Quite lovely, a lot of these buildings in a kind of strange way, but incidentally they were built on very valuable land, or the land has become valuable in a lot of these places. So I guess governments around the place see them as the property is they see the dollar signs.
There's a good system in place, I think. There's a range of services for a range of people with differing needs, I think, which is fantastic because one system isn't going to work for everybody.
Within our client group, they have it's a sort of protected, it's a sense of protection and I guess asylum in the proper sense of the word, that it's a refuge from the outside world, because the outside world's not particularly welcoming.
Social isolation is a big problem that we have in our rooming houses, where the only people that might come to visit is maybe a support worker or a nurse, or us landlords knocking on their door and asking if everything's still okay. So a lot of the time they can be quite alone in their minds and quite isolated from the rest of the community in their little 3 by 3 metre room. It is tough living.
The general person in the community, I think, believes that a psychiatric patient is going to come at them with a machete simply because you see the sensationalistic news items of a patient who held up traffic on the Westgate Bridge or came out with a knife from a house, whatever, and police had to shoot them or whatever it might be. This is pretty rare.
I think it's really important to make a distinction between this large group of people. I think should be seen as being a success story. They should be lauded for coping with this disability. We need to get away from the perception of the axe-wielding schizo.
Patients are held in restricted treatment facilities for far less time than they used to be. They are more aware of their rights, and there are more services around to help protect patient rights.
You'd be probably doing a disservice to some of your clients to try and hang on too long. So it's that fine line, trying to figure out how's this person going to cope.
Whether it was the right change, I'm not convinced myself. People do fall through the cracks in the system. Somehow they end up nowhere without any treatment, and ultimately, these people feel that nobody cares for them. That's a fairly large problem.
Hopefully we can learn from the mistakes of the past and look at what didn't work with the old institutions, and look at redeveloping a model that will be more suitable to people's needs.